Hello everyone, how you guys doing? Hopefully you're having a wonderful day. We are back again with another PWCC weekly review where I go through the top 100 soccer items auction off this week. As always, if you enjoy the video, do make sure to leave a like, would appreciate it greatly. Helps me, helps the channel. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into it. As always, starting from the bottom and working our way up. This week, decent watermark to be able to get into this auction, $180. We start off with a few odd and ends. Here we have a footballer flash, Erling Haaland. Pretty sure this is a case hit, but I'm not too familiar, so don't quote me on that. We also have a 2010 KDB. Felt like a pretty strong price for a PSA 5 KDB, although I haven't seen many of these at auction, and, you know, sort of given where Manchester City's been the last couple of years, it seems fair that he would be getting some love, and, you know, I can understand that fully. 2004 SP Authentic Ronaldo. Above that, we have a 2008 PSA 10 Messi sticker that goes for $186. Seems kind of cool if you're, you know, trying to put together highest grade run. Most of these types of stickers, Champions League especially, are going to be pretty common, but a 10's a good grade, obviously. Edgar Davids goes for 186 in a PSA 8. Felt like a pretty respectable price. I mean, we see R9s from just a couple of years later, or a year later, going for not too crazy of a premium compared to this, so, you know, feels pretty strong, although not as many graded for Edgar Davids. We have a Ben Barrack PSA 4 that goes for 186. Feels around the right price, I guess. I've looked up some of these Argas before of, you know, Di Stefano, Kubala, other grades and whatnot, and 186 feels fair. Pop one of one and higher. Above that, PSA 2 Franz Beckenbauer. This felt like a decently strong sale. I mean, $200 for a PSA 2. I don't think we've been seeing those prices for a bit. I mean, it looks pretty good from the front, so I'll give it that. I haven't checked out the back, but seems like a strong price. Score Team Black. Loa, 1 of 1, goes for 204. Feels like a decent price for a pretty random 1 of 1. Seedorf, PSA 6 goes for 204, so that's a good premium over the Edgar Davids. You know, probably fair, but yeah, PSA 6 pop 1056 higher, so a good bit, decent bit grade, I guess I would say, but definitely not as many as could be graded. So obviously, if you're a buyer of these types of stickers, do expect more. I mean, that's to be, you know, understood, I guess. 91, we have a Eric Cantona from the same year as the Zinedine Zidane rookie and a PSA 9, so super high grade. Pop 1 of 2, none higher, goes for 204. We have an Edinson Cavani, a gold in the clutch. PSA 10 goes for 210. Feels, you know, moderately strong. Cavani's not someone that I really see many collectors of. Could use a few, I would say, but at the same time, 210's nothing to scoff at. Peter Cech, rookie, I'm guessing. I'm not too familiar. I mean, it says rookie. I'm going to take it as rookie because 210 for a Peter Cech's a pretty good price. But not fully sure on that, but nonetheless goes for 210, pop 1 of 1. Above that, we have this 99 Itagama. I've never seen this before, but there's a Pele in it. I believe that's also in this auction. Could be wrong, but there were a few auctioning off in that block, and this goes for 210, pop 1 of 1 and higher. We have a 1948 Jose Santamaria here going for 210. I don't think I've really ever seen anything of his in these auction blocks, so that's pretty interesting. I mean, I recognize the name from, you know, some of the old UCL days. For 210, seems like a really cool one. I'm just glad I was able to see it. Next to we have a Van Nistelrooy PSA 7 that goes for 216. I think we saw one of these run recently. I didn't really check if it was a rerun or not. I'm just going to assume it isn't and assume everything's on the up and up, but that's a bold assumption, of course, as always. Out of 135, Julian Alvarez, PSA 10 goes for 222. We have a green Donruss here. This is the press proof that goes for 222. That's a sort of forewarning for what we'll see later. We have 222 here on this PSA 10 Kylian Mbappe. Interesting to see these so close. I mean, obviously this is a base card, but this isn't, I mean, it's more rare than the red press proof, but I don't really think anyone's going all that crazy over green press proofs, so just interesting to see there. We have a 1970 Cubillas that is in a PSA 9, goes for 222. I think I've seen the sticker a good bit, but never really in these auctions. Granted, it's pop 1 of 1 and higher, so, you know, probably not going to make it up here all too often. This is a Ben Barrack. We did see, I think it was last week, we saw like a 1.5 or maybe a couple weeks ago that went for 100 to 200 in that range, so this feels like a low price, at least compared to that. I would always say, like, you know, it's easier said than done because you probably don't really want to do it, but if you can, before you buy something, check the next weekly and see if another item of that same ilk is going to run, because you could probably get a better deal. I think that's what happened here. Still a really nice looking one, I will say, at 222. We have a Modric match ball here. This is out of 10, PSA 8, well, PSA 8 card. The auto's ungraded. Goes for 234. Feels like one that would have went for a lot more just a little while ago, but nonetheless, still a decent price, I guess. Kind of a cool match ball patch. This 1971 Saravan Pele, I looked it up just because I was interested, but for some reason it's really high. I don't know what happened here. So last PSA 2 did $93 on Golden. This PSA 1 does $234. So I don't know what that's about. Maybe someone was just getting a little eager. I mean, that's really bad because this is really beaten up. The face looks bad. You know, if you want to say shield, I'd believe it, because PSA 4 recently went for $246, so I don't understand that at all. Maybe it got legitimately purchased, but I wouldn't trust that as a comp if you're someone trying to buy one. David Luiz 2018 treble here. Nice little bottom part of the Chelsea patch, which is pretty cool. Manga Hyungmin Sun goes for $252. We have a Jude auto from the 2021-2022 BBB team set. This PK got reran. I'm pretty sure I made a comment on this last time, sort of joking how I thought it was really high. It still gets rerun. I still think it's really high, don't get me wrong. I know the 10s get a premium, but still, I don't think I've ever seen a PK card going for this much money in any of these auctions, so just seems random to me. I mean, you know, part of me wonders, like, well, what's a green worth then? Are we saying like a green's worth like $1,000? I mean, I'd find that hard to believe, but I actually bought a green off Card Hobby and then I sold it raw for like a few $100 maybe, so a green's not worth that much. I'd much rather have a green raw than a PSA 10 blue. That's what I'll say. We have a PSA 9 2006 World Cup Cristiano Ronaldo. Pretty high grade sticker Verlog here of Yashin in an 8.5. It goes for $252. And then we have a PSA 10 of Zinedine Zidane. There have been a lot of 10s of sort of these odd and end sets. This one's, you know, relatively notable because of the Thierry Henry rookie, and this is a pop 1 of 2 going for $264. We have the Kevin Keegan Cavendish. We see this a good bit. Still, you know, I guess sort of dropping in price, but becoming relatively stable in the lower hundreds range, so that goes for $264. Courtois purple PSA 10 goes for $276. We have 2 Grinches, so this is one at $288. I think, yeah, the other one's the exact same price. I probably like this one better. The colors look a little bit better. I don't know. The edges look weird on that one, I guess, for PSA 5. Nonetheless, looked at comps on this one, and seems like a decent sale. I mean, it is down from the last one and down from the last 2, I guess, down the last 3. But if we go back, well, I guess the peak was $1,700 on this, which is pretty high, I'm not going to lie. I don't know. I mean, it feels pretty fair to me. These have been pretty low, and I guess if we're comparing to 2022, which is really the peak of vintage, you know, 2022, maybe even lingering into 2023, but 2022 was really the peak of vintage, and this was worth $750. I will say again, like, how is this a PSA 5? Like, look at that bottom corner, look at that bottom, like, that looks terrible, but it's a 5, I guess. You know, is what it is. We have a Kaboom Benzema. I feel like we've seen this run before, but again, not going to check. Erling Haaland Donruss goes for $312. We have this George Weah. I thought this was interesting. I know this is earlier career for George Weah compared to the Continent. 1962, we have another Saravan. This one earlier career with Pele and Amarildo. This goes for $312 and a pop 1 of 2 6 higher. So, you know, pretty decent price there, and not too much of a bump on top of the PSA 1 we saw earlier, which is interesting. We have a 72-73 Panini Football Pele going for, what was that, $324, pop 1 of 2, just 1 higher in a PSA 6 grade. We see a Modric Kaboom going for $336 in a PSA 9. Feels, you know, relatively fair. I looked at this run. I found this one interesting in the sense of which one would you rather have between the 3. I think it's an interesting comp. I mean, obviously we have 2 Modric here, so you can sort of pick and choose between that. I do think that, you know, there is some intrigue on the Modric with the treble just because it's Real Madrid kit. Obviously, it's treble too. If you value that, feels like a pretty good price for a PSA 9 blue, I will say. I mean, you know, assuming there's a premium on a 10, a PSA 10 would go for like $1,000. I mean, that seems pretty solid for the, you know, highest numbered item within the set. For me, I'd probably go with the Molar, though. I think that would be my option that I would choose, and decided to look it up. Just because I think we've seen this one run before, and, you know, the trebles, we've looked them up a good bit recently. Haven't seen too many good Topps Chrome lately, so we'll take a peek at that. This one goes for $350. Last one was an SGC 10, although, okay, it's a 10-10. SGC 1010 did $276. You know, I don't know. It depends how you value it. If you value SGC 1010 equivalent to a PSA 10 with no auto grade, I mean, I guess, you know, you could say that that's an up price. I probably wouldn't. I guess last sale technically on a PSA 10 was $468 and then $525. this price down here is not a PSA 10. I think that's raw. But yeah, down to, I mean, a decent bit from the highs, I guess. Near about 500 on the highs, so down like 30%. But, I mean, you know, it seems like a pretty good card, at least to me. PSA 10 gold with an auto of Moeller. I mean, that should be one of the more collectible players in the set, you would think. This was an interesting one. I haven't seen this basically at all. This is 2001 Panini Sports Superliga, Xabi Alonso. Look that up because I haven't seen anything in that regard. And yeah, apparently the only other sale of this was for $73 on eBay. So yeah, definitely got the premium thrown in on PWCC, I guess, and you know, also not having any of these graded. This was never one that was on my radar, so that's interesting to see. And you know, I don't know if that's the same. Sir, I'm not even going to look. I'm not going to be nosy. I'm just not going to do it. We have a 62 Pele here, an SGC1 going for $348. We have a PSA 10 Philipp Lahm foosball that had sold for $372. Went to look it up, but there were no comps, which I found interesting because it was a PSA pop 1 of 9. Typically, you'd see some other comps if it's a pop 1 of 9. And what I found interesting then was that there was recently a sub of, I think it was 7 stickers, of which 5 of them gemmed. So if you've been following along with stickers lately, there's been a person, possibly more, that are sending in stickers and getting super high grades at super good rates. And this seems to have been one of them. I'm not sure. I haven't run it by him, but seems like one that got a decent little pop in terms of gems, so, you know, just be on the eye out for that. Not a whole lot more to say, but there might be more. We have a 2003 Topps Premier Gold Cristiano Ronaldo with the good old CH in the Cristiano. That goes for $372. This is a 1915 Alcantara, although it's more so a Barca team photo, but it has an early Alcantara picture, which is, you know, hence why it does a good number. I looked on Toto for some comps way back in the day and sort of pre-boom. These went for actually like $40-50, which in terms of Toto pre-boom, that's a pretty good price, so I can understand why this did $372. Next to it, we have a Vinny 2021-22 Chronicles Gold out of 10. This goes for $384. Vinny sort of the man of the moment. You know, I want to be excited, but at the same time, you know, Vinny's great, but you're going to have Mbappe coming in, and you're also going to have Endrick there soon, which means that basically he'll be like quite an afterthought in terms of hobby relevancy, which we'll see how it plays out. Maybe it doesn't play out that way, but at least seemingly where we are now, that's what I would think. Above that, we have a Kareem Adeyemi PSA 9 Red Refractor that goes for $384. A PSA 9 Lionel Messi goes for $384 as well. And then right here, I did take a stab at this, and I probably should have gone a little bit higher, but at the end of the day, I did buy something earlier in the week that was pretty hefty, so I didn't want to splash too much. But this was a PSA 5 of the 1958 Verlog set, and this is sort of the Crying Pele. At least there are a couple different Crying Peles. This is the more common one, but this is, you know, super high grade, pop 1 of 7, 7 graded higher, so not all that easy in this unstuck high grade. Hence why I went after it. Looking at comps, you know, PSA 1s and 2s typically go for like 100 to 200, so a 5 at 400 felt like, you know, kind of a deal, but wasn't really willing to go after it fully, I guess. 1981 Fulbito, we've seen a couple of these go lately. A PSA 8 went last week for huge numbers. PSA 1 here goes for $408. This Cristiano Ronaldo in the clutch camo goes for $420. Feels like a pretty solid price for an in the clutch camo. Not really you know, a parallel that people are looking for, not really an insert people are looking for, I would say. So it feels respectable. I mean, it is a PSA 10, which is going to get you a little bit of a premium. PSA 479 Calciatore Maradona, so took a peek at this just to sort of see, and it's down a bit, but it's not the lowest sale of the last year. Lowest was $360, so it's still above that, but yeah, sort of just hanging out there. They are obviously one of the more common in vintage, and that's not a great grade, of course, so that's going to play a factor. 54 Platin Di Stefano goes for $432. Next to it, we have a PSA 8 Vanderhoek Cruyff. We saw one of these go recently for nearly the same price. Seems like a pretty decent price considering the rookie, or, you know, rookie/second year is only maybe double the price in this grade. We have a Vinny. This is a treble on-card auto. Obviously in-person auto, but goes for $504, so a very hefty price, I would say there. I mean, that feels super strong, I would say, because, you know, there are treble base cards out there, and there are people that know these people that if, you know, the dollars line up, they will get them to sign them. So that's one I would expect to see more of. Above that, we have a 2022 Kylian Mbappe. We have a Lionel Messi auto. Again, so this is sort of, I know this is a rookie of Vinny, so there's some allure there, but like, You know, you can get a Messi on-card auto or a Vinny on-card auto. Which one do you rather have? Personally, neither, but, you know, if you had to choose one, give me the Messi. Then we have a 94-95 R9 and a PSA 8. This is sort of what I was referencing earlier in regard to R9s not doing crazy numbers in similar grades to the footballs we saw earlier. Goes for 540. I do feel decently confident in this one in the sense that it is harder to fake, although it's not my preferred in terms of aesthetics. It looks a little weird, but it is kind of 90s vibes. Above that, we have a 69 Vanderhoot, or, well, a 68-70 Vanderhoot that goes for 540 and a PSA 5. This Lionel Messi Purple World Cup Stars, I looked that up just because I was interested. Don't see a lot of parallels, especially of the greats from the Prism set going on auction too often at PWCC. So took a peek. Last sale was $396. I guess I'm interested if that's the same one, just because this is a nice bump in price, so worthwhile looking. It's actually not the same shirt, so, you know, pretty interesting that got, well, okay, I thought this was April this year. This was April of the year before, so this has been a while. It does get almost a 50% bump, which I find interesting because we'll see something later that is sort of going the other way. And I guess, you know, just interested in why that is. But yeah, 600 seems like a pretty decent price in regards to that one. This one made me laugh. This is a 73 Vanderhoot and a PSA 8. I do find it interesting that this goes for more than the 70 Vanderhoot. I like the 70 Vanderhoot more. Looks like a really nice action shot compared to this, where it looks like he's like yawning mid-picture and his hair's all messed. It's a goofy looking photo, but that goes for 600. Pop one of one, just one higher, probably because it's not graded that often is what I'd imagine, but someone was willing to splash out for it. 51 Greeling Fritz Walter here in a PSA 7, super high grade in this set. You don't see many of them either. Pop one of two, none higher. Really, really nice looking picture too, I will say. I went to look this up. I don't think there were any. Oh, okay. Yeah, there weren't really any. There's an SGC 6 though that went for 150, so almost 4x on the PSA 7, which is quite a premium, I would say. I mean, obviously PSA SGC, there's going to be some trade-off, but yeah, that's a pretty big trade-off. We have a 9.5 Yellow Sapphire Jude Bellingham rookie going for 660. We have the Messi version of the Ronaldo we saw earlier. So the Ronaldo, I believe, went for like 450-ish. This gets a good premium over that at 690. Then we have a Jaume Santos. So I took a stab at this. No, not really near where it is now, but this one goes for 700. Really cool to have seen two of these go in so quick succession. There was one of these a couple weeks back in an authentic, well, I think it was a PSA 1 grade, I could be wrong on that, but it was a really nice looking one. This one was absolutely torn to bits, as you can see on the front. I mean, it looks pretty rough, but the back's even worse. So yeah, in terms of the front, I mean, it's pretty bad. You know, this is all crumpled in. This is sort of torn, but if you look at the back too, I mean, that's just absolutely battered. But this was, I think it says pop one of two, none higher. Okay, so the other one was an authentic grade as well, but must have just been a much better authentic. But yeah, that goes for 690. Feels like a, I mean, fair price compared to the last one. The last one went for like $2,000, but it looked great on the front and you could read the entire back. So, you know, even within these grades, there's huge discrepancies in terms of how they look. Lionel Messi Futera, one of one, goes for 720. You know, I don't understand, or at least subscribe to the idea of paying premiums for Futera one of ones or whatever it may be, because really at the end of the day, none of the cards stick out to me. I think that's the problem with Futera, is it all looks so good that none of it looks good, which is an interesting thing in the sense that, you know, somehow you're penalized for making good looking cards. But I will say I don't like the little small strips of swatches placed on the card in weird ways. I like a nice full patch if I could get one. So that also puts me off. But 720 seems like a decent price. We have a PSA 10 Lionel Messi from the 2010 World Cup going for 720. Above that, we have a full Argentine row here with the Lionel Messi Red Breakaway PSA 10 going for 800. As you can tell, pretty good premium on that 2022 Messi World Cup Prisms. Next to it, we have 810 for this Donruss Maradona, and then 810 for this Panini Chronicles Maradona. I like the look of this one a little bit better. It looks like a cleaner card. This one looks a little bit more clunky, although typically you'd like the blue on blue, but this one just feels wrong to me. Probably go with the Napoli kit. This felt like a pretty good sale. I mean, it does have both of them, and I guess it's a pop one of one, just two higher, so maybe that helps it. But yeah, most people are grading these with PSA at this point. 810 on this, though, feels like a pretty solid sale. This has been the lowest selling Pele rookie for the most part. There's other ones that sort of sneak in there. Super high grade on this one. 840 for a PSA 8 Garincha from the 62 Vecchi set. So this is pop one of one and higher. I think highest sale prior was a PSA 6 at like 500, so, this gets a decent premium, not maybe a crazy premium, but at the same time feels like a really, really cool sticker to me. Victor Osimhen, don't get to see, many of his high-ends go on PWCC, but this out of 5 goes for $870. Took a peek just to see what other ones were doing lately, and this probably seems like the best deal, I guess. I don't know, I mean, you might be able to argue that you'd rather just have a red refractor out of 10, and save a couple $100. I know Red Wave probably isn't everyone's cup of tea, so that might be something. I do feel like it's probably a better deal than, say, for instance, the green optics. This green optic went for $2K, and then there was a gold optic for almost $2K. I'd take a red Merlin and, save $1,000 or maybe a little more, at least for me, but what do I know? I don't collect them, so let them decide, I guess. This was a super high price, pop 1 of 2, so presumably no comps, but $870 on this 2004 Panini Mega Cracks Ronaldinho, so this set, I guess you could say, has some sort of PMG feel. It just basically has a blank colored background, and people love it, so it goes for $870. Really hard to grade, because when you do have those backgrounds that are kind of metallic, and, they just show all the scratches, and there's really nothing to hide, but that goes for $870. PSA 10 Zlatan, so along those same lines of the Philip Lahm I talked about earlier, someone graded a bunch of these EA FIFA cards, stickers from 2001-2002 Panini Foot, tons in high grade, Thierry Henry, Zlatan, the whole deal. Sort of one of the warnings here is that this PSA 10 goes for $990, and there was 2 PSA 9s to sell within the last year, one for $990 as well, and then one for $1380. So, moral of the story here is I would really be cautious on paying these huge premiums on things that we haven't really seen play out yet. This was a sticker that sort of came around middle of the boom, towards middle tail end of the boom, when people started trying to find other niche things that were cool. And this is cool, don't get me wrong, but when you're paying a massive premium on a 9, if a 10 comes up, I think you have to know in your heart of heart, are you going to chase that 10? Because if you're not, then you probably shouldn't pay the premium for the 9, right? I think it's just people get a little over-eager, and then when the 10 comes out, they're not eager anymore because they have a 9, and they're like, whatever. But I think if you're willing to pay the premium for a 9, you should be willing to then go buy the 10 if it comes out and sell your 9 to help fund it. I think that's the way you should think about it, and if you're not willing, then you should probably just hold off. And easier said now that we've seen it play out, but just generally speaking with stickers, that would be how I'd approach it. I feel comfortable paying, solid money for stickers that we've seen flushed out, but this type of stuff, it's a little more risky. This was a super high price, but also an amazing grade. This is a PSA 5 of a 1922 Bernabeu. It says rookie. Again, I'm going to say I'm not too familiar with rookies in Spain in terms of which year. They just all have so many releases. They kind of blend together to me. Maybe it's a rookie. Someone can comment if they feel the need. But pop 1 of 1, then higher. And yeah, I went on Toto, and there's tons of these that sell for very reasonable prices, like in the $10 to $100 range. But none of them look like PSA 5. So, I guess you can make that sort of grading call if you'd like. Feels like a massive premium. I don't think that someone got a steal here, but at the same time, it feels like a really cool card, and you might never see another higher grade. I know we just sort of talked about that with a 2001 sticker, but it feels much more likely you're going to see more 2001 stickers than a 1922 card in amazing grade. So that's a risk you take. Above that, we have a row of Messis here. This was an interesting one in terms of which one people would want. I think most people would probably go with the 71 bis. Given that I have a 71 bis, I'd probably go with the Stargazing Galactic. I have the Ronaldo, so I'd add the Messi personally. But a 371 bis, can't really argue, and it actually looks pretty good based off what the front looks like. I mean, I can tell the bottom right corner's a little dinged, but generally that's a nice looking 3. I find it pretty egregious that this is the highest selling by over $300. Like, that to me is just disgusting. I do think it's interesting, like, what's the appeal in this card? When Messi's career is over, I know it's got an auto. He's going to sign everything in the world that people bring his way and give him some money to sign. He's just going to do it until he probably gets bored of it. But from what I can tell, I don't think he's bored of it. So, I mean, he looks bored when he signs, don't get me wrong, but he's still signing. Hence, there must be something in it for him. But, yeah, I mean, $1,500 for a PSG auto, or you could get the most iconic Messi card, or you could get a Galactic, which in my opinion, is an amazing modern card. yeah, I don't see how this one does the highest price, but what do I know? I think PSG stuff at the end of the day will be one of, if not the most forgotten cards of Messi, so I just worry about that. And honestly, I don't know who's collecting this. Like, are you putting together the Topps Chrome 2021-2022 run of autos, or like, what's drawing you in? I don't see it. I don't get the vision, but maybe that's just me. This felt like a super high sale, 1.5 going for 1,500. When we look back at past comps, yeah, there was an SGC one on eBay. Now, I will say eBay seems to do lower numbers for vintage than PWCC for sure, and even sometimes lower than Golden. I think things just kind of fall through the cracks on eBay. There's just so much going on that you don't get as many eyes. But, I mean, SGC one, a decent looking one, not terrible, goes for 600 just a couple weeks ago, and then this one goes for 1,500. Now, I know it is a half grade higher, and it does look really good, don't get me wrong, but I mean, it's a pretty nice premium. PSA 2 recently went for 1,890. That was with an eye appeal sticker. Little OC, little registration issue, whatever. I guess that's one where you could question the eye appeal sticker. And then there was also 2.5 that sold just a couple months ago for basically the same price, $1,560. I take the 2.5 all day. I feel like feels super strong, but it does look pretty good. I guess I'll take a look at the back just to finalize my decision here. If the back looks good, I can really understand it. Okay, the back looks, super, super nice. Now, it does have sort of this line running through it, but you can read everything, and so I can get it. I mean, I sort of understand it. Now, we have a PSA 7 2002 Cristiano Ronaldo rookie. There's also going to be an 8, so we'll talk about that here in a second. 1970 Panini World Cup packs. Now, I don't know what's going on here. I've never seen a panel of 2 of them, so I do find that interesting, but I guess a 2-for-1 there at $16.50. Pop one of 1, 2. I've never seen that, but that is definitely interesting. In this row, we have a couple Cristiano Ronaldo, so I am going to say just first off, I think this is probably pretty egregious. I mean, I guess I don't know. Maybe you're a Cristiano Ronaldo collector going for the full run. If you're looking at it from that perspective, I sort of get it. But at the same time, he has so many 2003 items out there. I mean, the SP Authentics are 2003, 2004. The Upper Decks, too. He has numbered stuff in there. He has autos. There's just so many cooler cards from 2003 than this Cristiano Ronaldo. I take the sticker every single day over the week. 7 or 8, I don't care. I take the Maradona, too. But this goes for $16.20. This goes for $18.30. Feels like the $18.30 was probably the better deal grade-wise. Now, they look pretty similar in terms of centering and all that jazz, and it's really hard to tell apart the grades in terms of stickers. But I felt like both were probably decent prices in the sense that you don't see 2 of these in high grade come up all too often, especially not in the same auction. So here I have them looked up. Basically, I looked up PSA 7s and 8s, and if we look basically over almost the last year, from last August until now, there was only 4 that sold in a PSA 7 or 8 grade. And then you have 2 sell, well, there might have been 5. Yeah, I think it's 5. Okay. So you have 5 in the last year, and then 2 sell in the exact same weekly. Not really too much of a dip in price. The last PSA 8 went for $2,010. This goes for $18.30. So seems like a lower sale for the PSA 8 for sure, but the PSA 7 going for $16.20 compared to the 2K on the 8 feels like a decently strong sale. So net, I feel like, they held up pretty well considering both of them were in the auction together. This PSA 4 feels pretty cheap, but I will say at the same time, it does not look like a PSA 4. Now, at the end of the day, PSA 4 basically just comes from having a clean back, right? If you have a clean back, you're going to get a much higher grade that just is the way it is. But when you look at the front, I mean, it's not really that great on the eye. It is super, super off-center, and the color really isn't great. The registration really isn't great. It's about as bad as you could look for a 4, but it is a super, super high grade, so we'll talk about that. Yeah, I mean, if we just want to scroll real quick before we get into prices, last time a high grade went for this that wasn't a 1, a 1.5, or a 2. I've been scrolling for a bit now. There's a 3.5 that went in 2022, so almost 2 years ago for this 3.5. Now, I will say that is a stellar 3.5. It did go for $5,500, so, quite the discount on this one. Which, to be honest, the market's dropped since then. It's also a much worse looking copy, so I totally get the price drop. There was also a PSA 5 that went for $6,900. Again, sort of the same issue where it's just a terrible looking 5. So, I mean, even back then, you're seeing that a PSA 5 basically went for the same as a PSA 3.5. I mean, a grand apart, a little bit more, but you get the idea. They're very similar for a grade and a half difference. So, eye appeal does matter a lot. But this felt like a super soft sale if you're someone trying to go after grade, because there was a 1 recently that went for $800. Granted, a super nice looking one. Again, the colors on this are great. Registration's pretty good. But there was also two that went for $840. So double the price on a one. I mean, you could have a PSA 1 and a PSA 2, or you could have a 4. Feels pretty fair, I guess, in terms of the premium that the 4 got. Now, again, you know, the eye appeal is what it is. You can argue that all you want, but yeah, it feels like a, you know, feels like a fair sale. I'll just put it that way. I think that makes sense. Above that, we have a 9.5 Messi Mega Cracks. This is a, was it number 62? Yeah, so that goes for nearly 2K. This is a min gem as well with a 9595959, so that's important of note. Yeah, I didn't bring up comps for this, but feels relatively fair. I think a PSA 10 for this recently went for like 5-6K, so this should be a decent bit down considering it's not only a 9.5, but a min gem. This was the one I was interested in terms of the purple World Cup stars we had earlier. The World Cup stars went for like 600 in a PSA 8, and this goes for 2K in a BGS 9. To me, that doesn't really add up in my head, because I would think that a PSA 8 World Cup stars, if it's going for 600, a 9's probably going for like $1,000. And I think the World Cup stars should probably be, you know, more than half off from the actual base card. So this out of 99 purple goes for 2K. I looked up comps on that, and yeah, last one, it was a PSA 9 to be fair, but last year went for 3360. Then before that we had 3330, and then we had 7K, but I don't know. Something I find interesting here is that, you know, the World Cup Prism, especially 2014, really started to make more of a narrative as things started to fall. Like in 2021, when things started to fall, people then started to go to the Prism as a safer, more solidified set. And it seems like it's dropped a good bit since, which is fair, but all that to say that just because you go to a better set doesn't mean you're not going there with other people, and doesn't mean that you're still not going to feel the effects of the market. Like, there's really no hiding for the most part. And, you know, feels like these are still dropped a little bit. I don't know. In terms of the subgrade, it's not terrible. I mean, couldn't really be all too much better, but at the same time, it's not really that great. So it sort of makes sense. Also graded recently, which is interesting. We have a Kaboom Messi, which I did look up. This one goes for $3120. Now, importantly, this is a Gem Plus. Yeah, that's what they call it. So it has a 10 on the edges and then a 9.5 on everything else. So that is, at least in my assumption, why this went up a good bit. If we look at the last comps, it was, what, 1,800, 2,100, 2,600, 2,300, 1,500, 1,400. Feels like a pretty nice sale, I will say, at least relative to what we've been seeing as of late. I did look up the PSA 10, and that was doing, yeah, like 4K, 4.5K, around there the last, year or so. So feels like a pretty strong price for the 9.5, so Beckett's getting some love. But yeah, 3,100 there, not too shabby. Still not even in the top 3 yet. We have this Vinny Jr. Optic Green PSA 8 that goes for 3,300. I looked that up just to see what we had. Couldn't find any, so I looked up golds. And yeah, looking at the gold sales, basically, last gold did 3,700. Now, it did have to get rerun, so presumably it sold the second time. I'm not sure. But this was a 9595958. So I guess it's also a 9. So I do find that interesting. It's nearly the same price. I'd probably take a grade higher and gold, personally. I don't think Optic Green would get that type of a premium, but it seems to have here. Feels like a relatively strong sale in terms of green. Definitely could be people chasing that, especially given where we're at the moment. And yeah, these have definitely taken a hit. If you do look at the bottom, though, in 2021, it was 3,600 for a BGS 9. And then, I guess this is a PSA 10. Yeah, they start going up in price, and then they kind of come back down a little bit. But net, Vinny stuff obviously doing pretty well considering, you know, the situation with Madrid and how that's going. Then we have a 1958 Gazenta Pele and Garincha and a PSA 5 going for $38.40. Now, I think this is only a PSA pop 1 of 1 and higher with both of them together. It still feels like this is definitely doable if it's just the Pele. And it still feels like a super high price. I mean, almost 4K. We saw, what was it, the 2 earlier going for like 700. So it's a good multiple to go from a 2 to a 5. Usually you would expect like a doubling, maybe a tripling. That's almost a 5x, which is a good premium. And as most people know, and if you don't know, this is cut out from a vinyl record album cover. It's not really supposed to be a sports collectible at all in terms of being cut out and stuck somewhere. So it's looked down upon for the most part because of that, but it managed to get slabbed by PSA, and thus people are still going to pay for it, especially if it's pop 1 of 1 and higher, so it gets $38.40. Next up, we have a Kaboom Kylian Mbappe. Goes for $39.60. I didn't look this one up. Probably should have, but feels like a pretty good price. I mean, at least comparing it to Messi. Obviously, this is earlier career for Mbappe, but yeah, almost 4K there is not too bad at all. And then the top three. So it's sort of a weird top three, if we're being honest. I guess this Swedish record Pele and a PSA 9. Also, one of the ones that sort of looked weirdly upon. It's very similar to the Gazetta in the sense that you can have Pele and Garrincha, or you could cut them both apart. It is not from a record album or vinyl album, but it is from a journal. But the journal was supposed to be cut out in the sense that they were actually desiring you to cut these out. So it's a little different in that regard. This goes for $8,700 though, pop 106 and then higher. Took a peek at that and yeah, felt super strong. I mean, it seems super strong to me, but this is a sale that like really brings it into perspective. You could have gotten this from Heritage. Now, granted, Heritage probably isn't getting the best bang for its buck in terms of vintage soccer in general, but this one for $3,700. Now, I think part of the problem is I don't know if these Pele, especially cross-sport collectors, if you're coming in from outside of soccer and you want to just buy the best of the best Pele and just put some money into something, you probably don't want this random guy next to him. Now, that's probably what they think, is it just some random guy? I mean, who's this guy? Obviously, it's, you know, one of the best outside of Pele Brazilians of all time, which for a soccer collector is really cool. Like, I would prefer this every single day of the week compared to just a Pele. I mean, if I really cared enough, I could just buy this, cut it down the middle, send it back in. I mean, worst case scenario, it's getting a 9, right? Best case scenario, maybe it gets a 10. You don't know. And so, to me, this feels super strong. I mean, or maybe this was super soft. I don't know. It does say that the last 9 before that of both of them together went for nearly 9K on a best offer. Best offers, you know, a little tricky to gauge. It was PWCC, so presumably, at least from what I understand, PWCC takes down the comps if they're not paid for. So I have a little bit more reassurance in that one. Last PSA 9 did go for actually 10K earlier this year, so I guess that's something to take into account. I'm just making sure these aren't the same certs. Yeah, they're not. This is actually just graded, which is interesting, but yeah, that's a super high price. It's a super high price, I'll just say that. Next we have a PSA 2, a Leafa that goes for 12K. I looked at this as well. Last sale was 10.2. Granted, this one does have an eye appeal sticker. Doesn't really look that great on the front, but I'm guessing the back's pretty decent looking and the colors are good and all that jazz. Last couple twos did 10K, nearly 11. Before that, 14, then 11. So feels like a decent price, not too crazy, but around where you'd expect. And then finally, we end off with the with the granddaddy of them all. So, yeah, this is one that, you know, people probably know how I feel, but we'll talk through it. So this is 2018 Panini Trebolino Messi Green, PSA 9, goes for 15K. I was looking to see if this was paid for. I guess I'll sort of keep an eye out on that as this week goes on and as we get into the next PWCC review next week. Man, that feels super strong. I mean, it is a PSA 9. It's a pop 1 of 2, none higher, but we'll go back and look at some comps and sort of, you know, talk through it. So the last one of these to sell sold last year for 6K in a PSA 8. So, you know, PSA 8 to PSA 9, this is assuming like a 3X, even if the market just stayed flat, which generally for Messi over the last year feels like it's been pretty flat, right? This would be a 3X on the grading premium. The one before that in 2022, around the low of the market, to be fair. This one sold for 4.7. So again, you know, pretty decent premium. And then before that, we had a raw that sold for 8K, although, you know, eBay auctions, especially auctions at all-time high pricing, always sort of skeptical. I also was told that there was a card hobby sale that sold raw for like 4K, closer to 4, I think it was, during this same time frame as well. So most of these have sold between 3 and 5 to 6K, and this one goes for 15, which is super high. And then back in the day, of course, 2019 sold for $50. So I always just like throwing that out there, just because, I mean, I find it so interesting. It really goes to show how much narratives just swing what people look at with so much fondness. The reason I do find this sort of interesting, I mean, we can't really look at this 2019, but basically to say that this card in 2019 was worth $50, and the way I look at it is there were other cards, there were tons of other cards in the set that were worth so much more, like so many more cards in that set that were worth so much more at this time, many, many multiples of what this is now, and now this is just sort of far and away past everything else. And I find that so interesting because, we've discussed in the past, but this didn't even boom when the hobby boomed. It boomed when, a certain YouTuber made a video comparing them to PMGs, and then everyone went crazy for them. And it still seems like we're in that mania a bit, but I do wonder if it gets paid for. The only reason I say that is because I see a lot of these don't get paid for it. Mostly, my assumption would be a lot of people have a vested interest in having these be expensive, and they don't show up enough to the point where you actually can manipulate them a bit, in the sense that, like, base cards you can't manipulate. How are you going to manipulate a base card? If it shows up on eBay selling 5 times a day, you can't buy them all. But if it's just one card that shows up every few months, or maybe, in this grade once a year or once every other year, you can manipulate that a bit better. So I'm interested. Super, super strong sale. I guess you guys can answer if you would rather have the Alifa PSA 2 or this and sort of go about it your own way. The one thing I do struggle with in regard to that is I'm not really sold on the Alifa being the Pele. Now, I sort of understand it in higher grades, but a PSA 2 is a super low grade, let's be honest. So I guess it depends what you're going for at the end of the day. You could go for a low grade iconic card, or you could go for a super rare, not really iconic card, but something that nichely people are very fond of in the soccer hobby, and like to see do well, and that seems to have done really well. So we'll take a look at next week's auction as we do see what's going on in the 125 auction. I haven't really looked too much myself, so yeah, we have another Kylian Mbappe. This is a PSA 10. I think the last one we saw was a 9.5, I'm pretty sure. We have a triple auto, a terrible looking triple auto, I will say. It's Leaf, I guess that makes sense. Zidane just kind of thrown on there. I wouldn't put him in that class, but I guess I can see it. I mean, he probably deserves it more than like a Erling Haaland and whatnot. So we have another Pele Dynasty auto. Beyond that, we have a Messi Gold, a Peroteo from 44, Cristiano Ronaldo. Everything that looks weird just automatically leave. I'll just come to assume that from now on. Edgar Davids Ruby. You don't see a lot of these rubies, especially on auction. That was another Zlatan, as I was referencing earlier. This Uwe Zähler. Yeah, it doesn't really seem like a strong week at all next week. I mean, there's sort of some odds and ends. I like that one. I'm a fan of the die cuts. But yeah, really kind of a soft week next week, I would say. I have looked at some of these, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's a really soft week next week. So, find something you like if you so desire, or maybe you can take next week off. But I'll still be here doing a review just all the same. So hopefully you enjoyed. As always, if you did, do make sure to leave a like. It would appreciate it greatly. If you want to see more videos like this as soon as I go live, make sure to subscribe. And also would love to hear your thoughts down below in a comment. Anything you thought sold high, low, or something you bought. Would love to hear about it. But with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day. And peace.